Welcome back to Native History. Today we're going to learn about the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee or the Six Nations, was a powerful and influential alliance of native tribes in northeastern North America. It was initially formed by 5 tribes: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. Later, the Tuscarora joined, making it 6 nations. The Confederacy was founded somewhere between the 12th and 16th centuries, although we don't know exactly when it was formed. It was established by 2 leaders, Deganawida, or the Great Peacemaker, who we'll say more about later, and Hiawatha, who sought to bring peace and unity among the tribes. The Confederacy was governed by the Great Law of Peace, which emphasized democratic principles and collective decision-making. The Iroquois had a sophisticated political system with a Grand Council composed of 50 chiefs, each of whom represented a member tribe. Decisions were made through consensus, reflecting the cooperative and egalitarian nature of Iroquois governance. Each tribe retained autonomy, but collaborated on common issues like war, peace, and diplomacy. The Iroquois were matrilineal, meaning that descent and inheritance were traced through the mother's line. Women held significant power, including the right to nominate and depose chiefs. They were known for their longhouses, which housed multiple families from the same clan. The Confederacy was known for its military prowess and strategic alliances, which helped it become a dominant force in the region. They engaged in both war and diplomacy with neighboring tribes and European settlers, often playing a key role in regional politics. As we'll talk about very soon, the Iroquois Confederacy had a significant impact on the development of democratic principles in the United States. Their governance structure influenced the framers of the U.S. Constitution. The Confederacy still exists today, maintaining its cultural heritage and political structure. Let's learn a bit more about Deganawida, the guy I mentioned earlier, who is called the Great Peacemaker. Deganawida is a central figure in the history and mythology of the Iroquois Confederacy. Although much of his life is shrouded in legend, his contributions to the formation of the Confederacy and the establishment of the Great Law of Peace are well recognized among the Haudenosaunee. Here's an overview of his life and achievements. Deganawida's birth is surrounded by miraculous and prophetic events. According to Haudenosaunee legend, he was born to a Huron virgin mother who received a vision that her son would bring peace to the warring tribes. His birth was foretold to be a significant event that would lead to the unification of the tribes. From a young age, Deganawida was driven by a vision of peace and unity. He believed that the constant warfare and violence among the tribes needed to be replaced with cooperation. He embarked on a mission to spread his message of peace and convince the warring tribes to come together under a single, unified governance system. Deganawida's journey led him to Hiawatha, an Onondaga chief who had also suffered from the violence and loss caused by intertribal warfare. Together, they formed a powerful alliance. Hiawatha became Deganawida's spokesperson, helping to communicate the vision of peace to the tribes. Deganawida and Hiawatha traveled extensively to persuade the leaders of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes to join their confederacy. They faced a lot of resistance, particularly from leaders like the Onondaga chief Tadadaho, who was initially opposed to the idea of peace. But the Great Peacemaker and Hiawatha eventually convinced Tadadaho to embrace the Great Law of Peace. According to legend, Tadadaho was transformed from a twisted, evil figure into a wise and peaceful leader. This transformation symbolized the healing and unification of the tribes. After all that, they were able to establish the Great Law of Peace, which was the constitution of the Iroquois Confederacy. The Great Law of Peace outlined principles of democracy, collective decision-making, and respect for individual rights. The governance structure included that Grand Council of 50 chiefs, representing the 5, later 6 nations, who made decisions through consensus. Deganawida introduced symbols like the Tree of Peace, an important symbol in Iroquois culture. It represented the unity and strength of the Confederacy, with its roots spreading out, holding the tribes together. He also established rituals and practices to maintain peace and resolve conflicts within the Confederacy. Deganawida's legacy lives on in the traditions and governance of the Haudenosaunee people. His vision of peace and unity remains a cornerstone of their culture. The Great Law of Peace influenced democratic principles and the formation of the U.S. Constitution. Although historical records of Deganawida's life are limited and primarily based on oral traditions, his impact on the Iroquois Confederacy are widely acknowledged. He is remembered and honored as a spiritual and political leader who transformed the Iroquois tribes into a powerful and unified confederacy. His life and work are celebrated through stories, ceremonies, and the continued existence of the Iroquois Confederacy, which stands as a testament to his enduring vision of peace and unity. I mentioned earlier that the Iroquois were matrilineal, so let me tell you a story about a notable Iroquois woman named Jikonsaseh, who is often revered in Iroquois history. and is regarded as a key figure in the establishment of the Great Law of Peace. Long ago, the land of the Haudenosaunee people was plagued by constant warfare. When all these tribes were at odds, there was a lot of destruction and despair, but amidst this turmoil, a wise and compassionate woman named Jikonsaseh lived near the great rivers and forests. She was known for her hospitality and her wisdom, and unsurprisingly, she was deeply troubled by the endless cycles of violence. During this time, Deganawida and Hiawatha were going on their mission to bring peace to the nations. They traveled all across the land seeking to unite the tribes, as we've just talked about. And one day, as they traveled through the forest, they came upon Jikonsaseh's village. Known for her generous spirit, Jikonsaseh welcomed them with open arms. She gave them food and shelter. She listened intently to their vision of peace and unity. Her heart resonated with their noble cause. Recognizing her influence and wisdom, Deganawida and Hiawatha shared their entire plan with her. Jikonsaseh was deeply moved by their message and decided to support their mission. She believed that the power of women, especially those with influence and respect, was crucial in achieving lasting peace. Jikonsaseh used her status and reputation to convene councils just of women from various tribes. She passionately advocated for the Great Law of Peace, explaining how it would bring an end to the bloodshed and foster harmony among the nations. Her persuasive words and genuine care won over many hearts. As the message of peace spread, more tribes began to listen. Jikonsaseh played a pivotal role in persuading the leaders of the different tribes to embrace the Great Law of Peace. Tadodaho, who we've talked about, was a formidable obstacle. He resisted the idea of unity, but Jikonsaseh was there when Deganawida and Hiawatha met Tadodaho. They met him with respect and determination, and it was Jikonsaseh's testimony, full of wisdom and compassion, that appealed to Tadodaho's sense of duty and the future of their people. Over time, her sincerity and the combined efforts of Deganawida and Hiawatha softened Tadodaho's heart. With Tadodaho's acceptance, that Iroquois Confederacy was formed, bringing together, in the 5 nations, the Great Law of Peace. Jikonsaseh became known as the Mother of Nations, the Peace Queen, for her pivotal role in uniting the tribes. Finally, let's talk a bit about how the Iroquois Confederacy influenced the framers of the United States Constitution. This is a subject of historical debate, but there are several key aspects suggesting that the principles and practices of the Iroquois Confederacy provided inspiration for the Founding Fathers. First off, the Iroquois Confederacy was a union of sovereign nations that maintained their autonomy while cooperating on broader issues like defense and foreign policy. This concept parallels the federal structure of the U.S., in which states retain certain powers, but they are, of course, united under one central government. The balance between local and centralized authority in the Confederacy likely influenced the framers' design of the federal system. The Iroquois Confederacy practiced a form of consensual decision-making in their Grand Council. The idea of representative government and consensus influenced the framers' approach to legislative process, where discussion and compromise were seen as essential to governance. The Great Law of Peace incorporated checks and balances within its system, where different roles and responsibilities were divided among various leaders and councils to prevent the concentration of power. The framers adopted this concept in the U.S. Constitution by creating separate branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, with distinct powers and the ability to check each other's authority. The Iroquois Great Law of Peace also emphasized the protection of individual rights and the importance of personal freedoms, like the freedom of speech. These were, of course, enshrined as individual liberties in the Bill of Rights. Ben Franklin, among other founding fathers, had significant interactions with Iroquois leaders and was thus very familiar with their political system. Franklin admired the Iroquois system. He especially loved how they were able to maintain unity and peace among diverse groups. In his writings, Franklin mentioned the Iroquois Confederacy as an example of a very successful system of governance that could inspire the colonies to unite. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, both of whom were also well-read and knowledgeable about various forms of government, encountered descriptions of the Iroquois Confederacy in their studies. Jefferson in particular emphasized the importance of learning from native governance systems in his notes in the state of Virginia. The Albany Plan of Union in 1754 was proposed by Ben Franklin. It sought to create a unified government for the 13 colonies. It was a predecessor of their eventual unification later in the 18th century. Franklin's plan was inspired by the Iroquois Confederacy's ability to form a united front while preserving individual autonomy. Although the Albany Plan was not adopted, it laid the groundwork for later discussions about unity and federation. Cadwallader Colden's The History of the Five Indian Nations in 1727 is a great resource for detailing the governance and history of the Iroquois Confederacy. Colden's book was read by many colonial leaders, and it provided many insights into the Confederacy's political structure and functioning. Colden's work highlighted the effectiveness of the Iroquois system and its potential applicability to colonial governance. So now you know more about the Haudenosaunee, a tribe and a group of tribes that influenced profoundly the way that the United States is shaped today, and they were native. Thank you once again for listening to Native History.